Ethan had always called the mountain lodge his sanctuary. It was the one place untouched by the world's chaos, left to him after his parents' passing. He'd spent years building his life in the city, but whenever the noise became too loud, he would retreat there to breathe again. After months of endless meetings, stress, and sleepless nights, he decided to return to the mountains. The thought of quiet mornings, the smell of pine, and the sound of the wind through the trees brought him peace before he even got there. As his car climbed the steep road, he imagined unlocking the door, lighting the fireplace, and sitting in the armchair his father once loved. But that peaceful image shattered the moment he reached the lodge. The driveway was full. 3 unfamiliar cars parked where there should have been none. A child's tricycle leaned against the porch. The sound of laughter echoed from inside, mixed with the clatter of dishes and voices. He blinked, thinking maybe he was dreaming, but reality hit fast. Someone was in his house. Ethan stepped out, the crisp air biting at his face. His pulse quickened as he walked up the porch. The front door was wide open, and the smell of cooking drifted out. Onions, butter, and something frying. When he stepped inside, he stopped cold. The living room was crowded. His sister Claire was standing near the kitchen island, holding a spoon, her expression turning from surprise to guilt the moment she saw him. Around her were strangers, an older couple chatting at the table, a man lounging on the couch, 2 children running across the floor. "Ethan," Claire said, her voice uncertain. "You're here already?" He stared at her, then at the people filling every corner of the room. "What's going on here?" he asked slowly. Claire hesitated, glancing toward a tall man near the couch. Richard, her husband. He got up, smiling in a way that wasn't friendly. "Hey man, didn't expect you so soon," Richard said, as if he had every right to be there. Ethan looked around again. The walls were different, his mother's paintings replaced with random artwork. The furniture was moved. His father's old leather chair was scratched, and the wooden table he'd refinished with his own hands had stains on it. "What is this?" he asked again, his voice firmer. Claire took a breath. "We just needed a place for a while," she said softly. "Richard lost his job and we had to move out of our apartment. You weren't using the lodge, so we thought—" "You thought what?" Ethan interrupted. "That you could just move in without asking me?" Richard's tone shifted. "It's not a big deal. It's all family here, right?" The house was empty. "No harm done." Ethan turned his gaze on him. Richard's confidence was unnerving. He'd always been like this, smooth, charming, and manipulative. From the first day Claire introduced him, Ethan had seen the warning signs. He controlled conversations, decisions, and even Claire's thoughts. But she'd fallen for his charm, believing he just wanted to protect her. Now Ethan saw the truth. Richard had taken more than control of Claire. He'd taken over Ethan's family home. Ethan clenched his jaw and walked through the house. Toys littered the floor, dishes stacked in the sink, and his mother's porcelain set, kept safely in a cabinet for years, was now half broken on the counter. The anger inside him grew heavy, pressing against his ribs. "You had no right to touch any of this," he said quietly. Richard's father, sitting at the table, looked up with a smirk. "Son, you should relax. It's a big place. We're just borrowing it till we get back on our feet." Ethan turned sharply. "Borrowing? Without permission? That's called trespassing," Claire flinched. "Please don't make it sound worse." "We're family. I was going to call you." "When?" Ethan asked. "After you finished redecorating my parents' house." His tone cracked with emotion. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent. Richard stepped forward, his expression darkening. "There's no need to overreact. We didn't destroy anything. If it bothers you so much, we'll clean up. Just calm down." Ethan stared at him, realizing something deeper. Richard wasn't apologizing because he didn't believe he'd done anything wrong. In his mind, this wasn't Ethan's property anymore. It was a prize, something he could claim by marriage. The arrogance in his voice made Ethan's stomach twist. He turned back toward the door without another word. Claire called after him, but he didn't stop. He got into his car, gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The view from the mountain was still beautiful, the snow-tipped peaks, the valley below. But for the first time, it didn't calm him. He felt hollow. That lodge had been more than a building. It was his parents' memory, the place they'd built together, where every wooden beam held a story. And now, his sister's husband had filled it with people who laughed as if they owned it. Ethan couldn't understand how Claire had allowed this. She had been kind once, loyal, someone who would never take advantage of family. But something in her had changed. Maybe life with Richard had made her fearful, dependent. Maybe she was trapped. He stayed parked for a long time, watching the lights flicker through the lodge windows. Laughter drifted out again, muffled by distance, and it burned in his chest like a slow flame. Every moment they stayed there, they erased a piece of his parents' legacy. That night, Ethan drove back to town and checked into a small roadside inn. He couldn't sleep. His mind replayed every word, every face, every detail of what he had seen. Richard's smug smile, the way his father had dismissed him, and Claire's silence. He thought about confronting them again, shouting, demanding they leave immediately. But what good would it do? Richard would twist the situation, make Ethan look unreasonable. Claire might take his side out of fear or guilt. No, this couldn't be solved with words. Ethan had to think differently. The next morning, he drove back up the mountain, this time quietly. He parked his car a little farther away, where no one could see. Through the trees, he could see smoke rising from the chimney. The house looked peaceful from a distance, as if nothing was wrong. But he knew better. Inside that lodge, his trust had been stolen. His kindness had been used against him. He'd always been the responsible one. The brother who helped Claire through college, who paid her rent when she struggled. And now, the same sister he'd supported had let someone else take his home. Ethan stood there for a long time, thinking. His breath came out in white clouds in the cold air. A quiet resolve began to form. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about reclaiming what was his, without screaming, without losing control. He wouldn't let Richard know he was planning something. He got back into his car, started the engine, and drove down the winding road. Each turn felt like a decision tightening in his chest. He had seen enough to know what kind of man Richard was. A taker, someone who believed charm could cover manipulation. But Ethan had something Richard didn't: patience. And patience could be more dangerous than rage. That night, as the city lights came into view, Ethan felt a strange calm settle over him. He knew what he had to do. He'd play along, smile if needed, and wait. Richard and his family thought they could take his home without consequence. They were wrong. For now, Ethan said nothing to Claire. He let them believe he had accepted the situation. But inside, a quiet plan was forming. He would make them regret turning his peace into chaos. He would take back the lodge. Not just the building, but everything it represented. He looked up at the dark mountain in the distance and whispered to himself, "You started this, Richard. But I'll be the one to end it." The words echoed in his mind long after he reached his apartment. The next chapter of his life, and theirs, had already begun. Ethan wasn't going back to the lodge for peace anymore. He was going back for justice, and this time he wasn't going to lose. The next morning, Ethan returned to the mountain lodge, but this time he wore a calm smile. He walked in carrying groceries, acting as if everything was normal. Claire looked surprised but relieved, and Richard greeted him like an old friend, pretending nothing had happened. Ethan kept his anger buried deep. He spoke softly, helped with breakfast, and even played with the kids. He wanted them to think he had accepted the situation, that he was harmless. But inside, every polite word he spoke was a cover for the plan forming in his mind. Over the next few days, Ethan studied everything. He noticed who did what, how they treated Claire, and how Richard controlled every small decision. Claire rarely spoke her mind anymore. She laughed when Richard laughed and stayed quiet when he glared. Ethan realized she wasn't living there out of choice. She was enduring it. His once bright, confident sister now moved like a shadow in her own home. He also learned that Richard's family wasn't just staying temporarily. They had settled in. They acted like the house belonged to them, talking about redecorating and even building an outdoor shed. Ethan's anger grew quietly. He found bills with Richard's name on them: electricity, gas, even the property maintenance service. It didn't make sense at first, but when he checked closely, he saw what had happened. Richard had transferred the utilities into his own name, giving himself fake authority over the lodge. He'd done it without Ethan's consent. Worse, he'd been using Ethan's lodge to earn money. One night, Ethan found a printed sheet in the kitchen, a rental listing with photos of the lodge posted online. Richard had been renting out rooms to strangers on weekends when Ethan wasn't around. The thought made Ethan's chest tighten. His family's home was being used like a hotel by the man who had stolen it. That night, Ethan sat in his car at the edge of the forest, the cold air wrapping around him. He replayed every moment in his mind. His parents had trusted Claire. They'd believed she would protect what they left behind. Instead, she had handed it over to a man who saw it as property, not memory. Ethan clenched his fists. He could have yelled, but that would achieve nothing. Richard was the kind of man who thrived on conflict, loud, manipulative, and skilled at twisting stories. No, yelling wouldn't work. Ethan needed precision. He needed to dismantle Richard's game quietly and leave him no escape. The next morning, Ethan changed his tone completely. He was cheerful, helpful, almost friendly. He asked Richard about his work, complimented his plans, and even offered to help fix a broken pipe. Richard's family began to trust him, thinking the city guy had finally learned his place. But while they talked, Ethan listened. He learned that Richard had debts, serious ones. He'd borrowed money using fake business names and had been hiding it from Claire. That explained the pressure, the move to the lodge, and the fake confidence. Richard wasn't a successful man protecting his family. He was a desperate one running from failure. Ethan began collecting proof. He went into town, quietly visited the land office, and confirmed the lodge was still under his name. He requested copies of all recent transactions related to it. Then he visited the utility companies and showed them his ownership documents. They told him about the forged signature. Richard had faked Ethan's approval to transfer everything. Ethan didn't get angry. He smiled. It was all he needed. Every detail, every forged document was another piece of evidence. At night, he returned to the lodge, calm as ever. Richard thought he'd won. He bragged about his plans to rent out more rooms, even mentioning how, eventually, he might buy the lodge from Ethan at a fair price. Ethan pretended to laugh. Inside, his mind was sharp and focused. He was building a trap, and Richard was walking right into it. Days passed, and Ethan made his move carefully. He contacted an old friend, Adam, who worked in real estate. Adam owed him a favor. Ethan explained everything, and Adam agreed to play a role. Together, they crafted the perfect scenario. Ethan would pretend to sell the lodge to a buyer. The inspection would reveal the truth about who really lived there and expose Richard's illegal use of the property. Ethan didn't tell Claire yet. He wanted her to see what kind of man her husband truly was. One morning, as the sun rose over the peaks, Ethan stood on the porch with his coffee. Richard joined him, smug as always. "You know," Richard said, "if you ever decide to sell, I'd be interested. This place has potential." Ethan turned to him with a faint smile. "Funny you say that," he replied. "I've been thinking about selling. In fact, someone's coming to see it tomorrow." Richard froze. "What?" "Yeah," Ethan said casually. "A serious buyer. Might be a good deal for both of us." For a moment, silence hung between them. Richard tried to laugh it off, but his eyes betrayed panic. He muttered something about not being ready, about needing time. Ethan shrugged and went inside, hiding the satisfaction that surged in his chest. He'd just thrown the first stone. That evening, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Richard argued with Claire behind closed doors. His voice rose, angry and sharp, while Claire's trembled. The rest of his family pretended not to hear, but the tension filled every room. Ethan sat quietly by the fireplace, pretending to read. Inside, he felt both anger and guilt. He wanted justice, but seeing Claire cry broke something in him. She didn't deserve this life, even if she had made bad choices. He knew she was trapped by fear, not greed. When Richard's family went to bed, Claire came to Ethan, her eyes red. "You're selling the lodge?" she whispered. He looked up slowly. "I said a buyer is coming to look at it," he corrected. "If it sells, I'll make sure you're taken care of. But I'm done watching my parents' home be destroyed." She shook her head, tears falling. "Richard said we have a right to stay. We're family." "Family?" Ethan said softly. Then why did he forge my name on the bills? Why did he rent out rooms behind your back? Does that sound like family to you? Claire's expression shifted from confusion to shock. He wouldn't. Ethan handed her a printed copy of the rental listing he'd found. Her hands trembled as she read it. I wanted you to see it yourself, he said quietly. Tomorrow you'll see the rest. The next day came faster than expected. Ethan arrived early, dressed neatly, his friend Adam with him. Richard's family gathered in confusion as Adam introduced himself as a potential buyer. Richard tried to take control of the conversation, acting as if he owned the place. But Adam asked questions, legal ones. Can I see the ownership papers? Who's listed on the property title? He asked with a calm smile. Richard stammered. We manage it together. Ethan stepped in. Actually, he said, pulling out a folder, it's mine. Always has been. Here are the documents. Adam glanced at the papers and nodded. Perfect. Everything seems clear. He turned to Richard. So, you've been living here without permission? The color drained from Richard's face. Claire stood frozen behind him, realization spreading across her expression. Ethan said nothing else. He didn't need to. The truth was now laid bare in front of everyone. When Adam left, Richard exploded. He shouted at Claire, blaming her, calling Ethan names. But this time Claire didn't cry. She stared at him, her voice steady. You lied to me, Richard. You used me. Her words struck like stones. Richard tried to argue, but Ethan handed him an envelope. Copies of the forged documents, the proof of his lies. You'll leave today, Ethan said, his tone calm but final. If you don't, I'll take this to the authorities. Richard's arrogance shattered. His parents tried to defend him, but Ethan didn't listen. Within hours, they packed their things and left. The house grew quiet again, empty of noise and deceit. As the last car drove away, Ethan stood at the door, breathing deeply. Claire remained behind, still processing everything. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded, not out of anger but sadness. I know, he said softly, but some things can't be undone. The lodge was his again, but it didn't feel the same. The silence that once brought him peace now felt heavy, almost haunting. He'd won, but the victory tasted hollow. The damage was done. That night, as he sat by the fire, Ethan realized revenge didn't bring peace. It only ended noise. The real battle was inside, the choice between anger and forgiveness. And though he'd reclaimed the lodge, a part of him still felt lost among the mountains. The morning after Richard and his family left, the mountain lodge stood in silence. For the first time in weeks, Ethan could hear the wind again, the soft rustle of pine trees and the distant call of birds. The house was his once more, but instead of relief, there was a strange emptiness inside him. He walked through every room slowly, tracing his fingers across the scratched furniture, the dusty shelves, and the faint smell of the food they had cooked. The memories of laughter that had filled these walls weren't warm. They were reminders of betrayal. The place that had once been his comfort now carried the weight of deceit. Ethan opened the windows to let the cold mountain air in. It swept through the rooms, clearing the scent of the people who had treated his parents' home like a playground. For hours he cleaned, removing broken cups, rearranging furniture, scrubbing the stains on the kitchen counter. Each task felt like washing away their fingerprints from his life. Yet no matter how much he cleaned, he couldn't wipe away the image of his sister standing at the door, apologizing with tears in her eyes. He had taken back his lodge, but in doing so, he had lost his only sibling's trust. When the sun began to set, Ethan sat by the fireplace, staring at the flames. His revenge had worked perfectly. He had exposed Richard's lies, forced him to face his shame, and reclaimed everything that was stolen. But as the fire crackled, he realized the satisfaction he expected never came. Instead, there was only silence, cold, deep, and heavy. The plan had gone exactly as he wanted, yet something inside him felt broken. A knock on the door startled him. When he opened it, Claire stood there, holding a small bag. Her face was pale from crying, her voice soft. "Can I come in?" she asked. Ethan nodded silently and stepped aside. She walked in, looking around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. Everything was back in its place. The paintings, the photos, the furniture. The home looked normal again, but the air between them was thick with unspoken pain. "I didn't know what he was doing," Claire said quietly, not looking at him. "He told me the bills were in his name because it was easier." I believed him. Ethan didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the floor. "I thought he just needed time to find work," she continued. Then one thing led to another, and suddenly his whole family was living here. "I didn't want to upset you. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would all work out." Her voice broke. "I didn't mean to betray you, Ethan." He sighed, finally turning to face her. "You didn't stop him either," he said softly. "You watched while he turned this place into something it was never meant to be." Claire wiped her eyes. "I was scared. Every time I tried to speak up, he'd remind me how much we owed him. He said you wouldn't understand. He made me believe we needed him." Ethan felt his anger fade, replaced by sorrow. His sister wasn't cruel, she was trapped. He'd spent years seeing her as someone strong, but in truth, she'd been fighting a battle no one else could see. "He used you," Ethan said quietly, "but you have to stop letting people do that." Claire nodded slowly, her tears falling freely now. "I've left him," she whispered. "He's gone for good. I just don't know where to go now." Ethan looked toward the window. The mountain view stretched endlessly, a reminder of how alone they both were in their pain. After a moment, he spoke. "Stay here for now, but this time it's different. You'll help take care of the place. We'll rebuild it together." Claire looked at him with surprise, then relief. She nodded, and for the first time, a faint smile appeared through her tears. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Days turned into weeks. Ethan and Claire worked together, restoring the lodge to what it once was. They repaired the broken furniture, repainted the walls, and fixed the porch railing. Each day brought small moments of healing. They cooked meals like their mother used to, laughed softly over old memories, and sat by the fire at night, without the tension that once filled the air. But even as the lodge returned to life, Ethan's thoughts often wandered back to Richard. He wondered what the man was doing now, whether he had learned anything, or if he blamed Ethan for everything that happened. A part of him still felt bitter, another part strangely hollow. Revenge had given him justice, but it had also taken away his peace. One evening, as snow began to fall outside, Ethan found Claire sitting by the window. She was staring into the white distance, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked quietly. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes. Do you hate him?" He thought for a moment. "I did," he admitted, "for a long time. But hating him doesn't fix anything. It just keeps the wound open." Claire looked at him, her eyes full of regret. "I hate that I let him do this to us." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then don't let it define you," he said. "We both made mistakes. But this lodge, it's our family's legacy. Let's honor that instead of destroying it." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The fire had burned down to embers and the house was quiet. He thought about everything that had happened. The invasion, the lies, the betrayal, and his revenge. For so long, he had believed that reclaiming the lodge would bring him peace. But now he understood that revenge only fixes the outside. It never heals the inside. His parents had taught him that family mattered more than pride. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that truth. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. He called Adam, his real estate friend, and asked him to stop the sale of the lodge. Adam was surprised. "You sure? You could get a great price for it now." "I'm sure," Ethan said. "Some things aren't meant to be sold." When he hung up, he felt lighter. For the first time since returning to the mountains, his chest didn't feel heavy. The revenge, the anger, the disappointment, it all began to fade. What mattered now was rebuilding, not just the house, but the bond he and Claire once had. Weeks later, Claire found a new job in town. She began visiting a therapist and slowly rediscovered her confidence. Ethan noticed the change in her eyes, the same spark she used to have when they were kids. It made him realize that forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was freedom. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Claire stood beside Ethan on the porch. The air was crisp and the sky glowed orange, You know, she said, I used to think revenge was about getting even. But now I see it's just another way of staying tied to pain. Ethan nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. Revenge makes you think you're taking control, but really, it controls you. They stood there in silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. For the first time, the lodge didn't feel like a place of loss anymore. It felt alive again, a place of healing. Later that night, Ethan sat by the fire alone. He stared into the flames, remembering everything he had lost and everything he had learned. The anger that once fueled him had burned out completely, replaced by calm acceptance. He realized he didn't need Richard's downfall to feel whole. The real victory was choosing peace over bitterness. When the fire crackled softly, he smiled to himself. The lodge was more than wood and stone. It was a symbol of endurance. It had survived storms, neglect, and betrayal, and now so had he. As the night deepened, snow began to fall again, blanketing the mountains in white. The world outside was quiet, untouched, and still. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling warmth spread through him, not from revenge, but from release. He whispered softly, as if speaking to his parents. It's home again, and for the first time in a long while. He felt peace, not the hollow quiet of loneliness, but the calm that comes when you finally stop fighting ghosts. Moral: true revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about reclaiming your own peace. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it frees you from being trapped inside it forever.